Hey everybody, Gregg Bendian here for the ProgCast, and it is our 50th episode. Can you believe it? And it's a very special one for me because I get to talk to one of my favorite drummers, one of my favorite people, the great John "PUGWASH" Weathers from Gentle Giant. You know him from Octopus, you know him from Glasshouse, you know him from Freehand, you know him from Power and the Glory, and I can go on, and we do go on and on about that music together for nigh on 2 hours. And Mr. Weathers is in great spirits, and it was my honor and great pleasure to spend time with him. And episode 50, John Weathers.
Well, hello and welcome, everyone. This is the ProgCast, and I am your host, Gregg Bendian. Welcome to our 50th episode. This is a special 50th episode, kind of a gift to myself and a gift to the fans of progressive music, because you all know this guy, you all love this guy. And I have, since I was a teenager, been following this man's drumming and the band that he is a member of and always will be a member of, the great, wonderful, spectacular Gentle Giant. And I am so honored to welcome my guest today, Mr. John "PUGWASH" Weathers. Hello, John, and welcome.
That's quite an intro, Mr. Bendian. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and to see your smiling face again.
Yes, sir. I should tell people a little bit about our history because, we've corresponded over the years, and I was very fortunate to be able to make a record with my group Interzone in 1996 that was dedicated to Gentle Giant, inspired by Gentle Giant, not a Gentle Giant cover album, not a Gentle Giant ripoff, but really just me giving back to the guys something of my own. And then John and I started a correspondence, and my group, the Mahavishnu Project, played not too far from his home in Wales in, I think, 2001 or so. And John wasn't feeling well and didn't make it to the gig. He was, of course, invited, but he didn't come down. The promoter was a friend of his. And then we spoke by phone, and he spoke with my son, who was a budding young drummer in the single digits at that time. And, I just always listened to Gentle Giant. I always listened to the music. I always felt something was going on there that I needed to know about. There was a lot of tuned percussion, which I was studying at the time as a student. There were a lot of ideas being thrown around in a typical rock band setting, but not so typical, because there was counterpoint and there was dissonance and there was variation and there was all sorts of stuff going on. And the man driving the bus was John Weathers. And I was fortunate enough to see Giant on their final New York performance for Civilian at what was used to be called the Academy of Music, but then later became the Palladium. Mm-hmm. And I have very fond memories of seeing Giant live. So this is really a pleasure for me to be able to speak with the guy who really drove the music. And John, I'm just such a big fan, and I'm just so pleased to have you today.
Thank you. As I said, pleasure to be here.
Can I ask you, what are your earliest connections with music? Because everybody has to start somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, my mum and dad were very keen on having music in the house. They were big fans of people like Brook Benton, Billy Eckstine, Sarah Vaughan, Sinatra to a certain extent. And as a matter of fact, when I was very young, must have been about 5 years old or 6 years old, they gave me an old wind-up record player, a gramophone, we used to call them in that days, with one record. And it was an old 78 thing, and it was 16 Tons by Tennessee Ernie Ford. And I wore that record out. I really did. I had my own bedroom, and I just used to sit there and play it and play it and play it. But they had music in the house all the time. And an uncle of mine was a big fan of Ray Charles and lots of blues guys. So I was well into music right from an early age.
When did you start hitting things?
After hearing All Shook Up for the first time, well, that would be mid-50s, 57, something like that. So I'd have been about 9 or 10. And I loved the record. And I wanted to work out what the guy was doing, what the drummer was doing in the background, because it's a lovely kind of shuffle thing. And my mother was big on knitting, and to knit like big sweaters, she had wooden knitting needles, big things, almost the size of a drumstick. And I just sat on my bed and said, right, well, this guy is doing two different things. He's doing one thing with his right hand, and he's doing another thing with his left hand. So I just started messing around and got the independence right. And from then on, it was like wooden chair, anything. I'd hit anything. My mother kept screaming up, "Will you shut that racket up?" But I carried on with it until I browbeat my parents into getting me a drum kit, a real cheap 3-piece thing. It was, but I was practicing all that time. And it was rock and roll was going on. So I became a big Jerry Lee fan, Little Richard. So I used to play along to those, and the Shadows was a big time instrumental group in Britain at that time. Cliff Richard's backing band, and so I learned all that stuff, and then got a drum kit. But I was about 13 before I actually got my own drum kit. But I was only allowed to practice when they were out. And that's how I started.
I mean, it's so similar to my story, because I really did have to lobby to get a drum set. And the first one was such a toy that it was destroyed almost immediately. Then the second one was used stuff, some of which I still have, like a 68 Slingerland, Blue Sparkle, tom and bass drum. And then eventually, you get a job, and then you try to get the kit that you want to play,
Mm-hmm.
And so how did you get into actually gigging with people?
Right. Well, I fell out with my parents over a lot. I was in with a bad crowd of guys, like borrowing cars and stuff like that. And I wasn't going anywhere. I was going to go to jail eventually. But I got into a little bit of trouble, and my parents and I were arguing all the time. I was a rebel. So I actually ran away from home. My father was a Liverpudlian. He was born in Liverpool. And I'd been on vacation up to Liverpool with them. So we had relatives up there. And that's where I ran away to. And eventually, they sussed almost immediately where I'd gone, got in touch. I moved in with an aunt up there. And she said, yeah, I'll take him on, straighten him out, get him a job, do all that stuff. And that's what happened. They allowed me to stay up in Liverpool at the age of 14 and a half, 15. At that time, you could leave school when you were 14. That was the way it was. You were legally allowed to leave school at 14. So, so my aunt got me a job in a bakery delivering cakes and bread and stuff like that. And I could see there was a lot of music going on, which it was then, of course, early 60s, 62, something like that. And I arranged for my drum kit to be sent up with a friend of my father's who was doing runs back and forth, delivering stuff to my hometown.
In Wales?
In Wales, yeah, Carmarthen. And he brought my kit up. My aunt wasn't too happy about it. But I was allowed to practice once a week on a Wednesday with my drum kit. That was like a half day in the bakery shops and the cake shops. And I bumped into a couple of guys and, I was quite a tall guy and started going to gigs and bumped into a couple of guys who lived just around the corner and got talking, and they said, oh, we got a bit of a band, but we haven't got a drummer. They were called the Planets, just 2 guitar players. So I started doing gigs with them, just freebies in pubs. You just got paid with beer, and I would take my drum kit on a bus to the gigs.
Wow.
So
that's dedication.
That's how I got started. And I was doing my homework up there. Went to see lots and lots of Liverpool bands. Never saw the Beatles, but I saw pretty much everyone else connected to Merseybeat. And that was about it in Liverpool anyway. Came back for a holiday in Carmarthen and realised how much I missed Wales. So I came home and I was like a reformed character, having worked, discovered music. I was a totally different guy. And that was that. So I came back to Carmarthen, to Wales. Do you want me to carry on with the story?
Well, I want to jump in and ask you, when did you pick up the nickname PUGWASH?
Oh, that was about a year or 18 months later.
Oh, yeah.
After I got back from Liverpool and joined another band in Wales and was kind of proper drummer in a proper band then. I got the nickname just by accident. I was loading my drum kit into a gig, and there was a singer from another band, and he was wearing what we used to call a Matelot t-shirt, which was white and blue stripes, white with blue stripes. Matelot is a sailor. And there was a cartoon series on then at that time called Captain PUGWASH. Well, the guy who owned the venue saw the singer come in with the Matelot t-shirt, and he said, "Oh, you look like Captain PUGWASH." And the singer of the band said, of this other band said, "No, I'm not Captain PUGWASH. He's Captain PUGWASH." And that was it. From that day to this, I've been known as PUGWASH. The name just like stuck like glue.
And so what was the origin of the name PUGWASH in the character? Why PUGWASH? Any reason?
That was the name of the captain who was a sailor. He was a pirate in the cartoon series. You can get it on YouTube, I'm sure. It's just called Captain PUGWASH. And it's such a thrown together cartoon.
Right.
Because it's not drawn characters. It's little pieces of cardboard going back and forth like that. They're all hilarious.
Yeah. So were you playing mainly in kind of skiffle bands and doing a lot of bluesy stuff? What was the musical situation for you?
Right. I got back to Wales, and the drum kit kind of, I don't know, just sat in the house. And a guy I knew came to see me, and he said, I believe you've just come back from Liverpool. I said, yeah, I spent a year, 18 months up there. And he said, well, do you know that, can you play that Mersey beat? And I said, yeah, that's easy. And he said, well, our drummer isn't very good. He said, he plays everything back to front. So would you like to come and try for us? We've got a drum kit. So I said, yeah, fine. So we went to his house and set up the drum kit in his living room, and he put on some records by Liverpool artists, and said, "All right, play along with them, and let's see if you can play this Mersey beat." And it was just boom, boom, ga 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 boom, boom, ga ga ga. It was dead easy. And he said, "Great, you're in." That's it. But his mother was very upset because I was hitting the bass drum so hard it tore a hole and 2 holes in her carpet.
Oh, yeah.
And he still tells that story to this day. But they were a very good rock and roll band. Played a lot of rock and roll standards, and had all played the hits of the day, the top 20 hits, a lot of which were Mersey beat, Beatles stuff, Gerry and the Pacemakers, the Searchers, you name it, all the Liverpool bands. And they were a hell of a good band, a really, really good band, had good gear, a couple of Gibson guitars, Fender bass. And I was the worst one because I had an old Stratford kit. I inherited a Stratford kit, which was fairly well made, but I played loud. I used to hit them. It took me about a year to totally destroy them. By then, I'd bought my own kit. I was ready to buy my own kit.
You always hit hard, though, huh?
Yeah, well, it was due to the fact that amplifiers started off at being 15 watt, then they went to 30 watt, then they went to 50 watt. So you had to be heard, and so you had to hit them.
And also, there's a big part of the music too, right? Is the energy of just the concussion of hitting those things.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
You can't play nice and play that music.
Not in dance halls and play rock music. Rock music is loud. It always has been.
You came up at such an interesting time because I don't speak to a lot of people that were in Wales during the 60s, but I'm very curious how you would have found out about sort of the tide changing toward more progressive things, towards more experimental things, because I know that you didn't go directly from playing rock and roll to playing in Giant. So what was the transition like?
Well, the rock and roll band changed their name from Peter Shane and the Vikings, which was a typical kind of rock band name, to Brothers Grimm, because music then popularly had moved into R&B and blues. So it became like an R&B band.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, it progressed into soul. The next band I was in, which was the Eyes of Blue, was a soul band. And soul then kind of became West Coast. we started listening to West Coast, to Moby Grape and Love and Buffalo Springfield, that kind of thing. And they were very, very adventurous bands, really were inventive, and from that, then we started writing our own stuff, or the guys in the band did with my help. I wrote some of the stuff too. And that then was called like orchestral rock, which was the predecessor of what's now known as prog, which was like adventurous rock. You'd write strange things. If you go back to the early Eyes of Blue things, they're progressive. Yes used to come and watch us when we were playing in London. That stuff was very, very popular. We got quite well known. We won the Melody Maker Beat competition in 1966, which kind of gave us a leg up, and went on tour with Georgie Fame and Butterfield Blues Band, Eric Burden and the Animals. Went on a nationwide tour with those, and that kind of started it all off. And got us a record contract and stuff like that. And that's how I got to the progressive stage.
So were you hearing Moody Blues and King Crimson and these kinds of things? Were they getting in there somehow and moving things around in your musical brain?
Well, this was before then. This was like 1967 that we started.
So the Beatles were still going. Were they an influence?
Oh, for sure. And they of course were very, very progressive. Sergeant Pepper, man. Oh, come on. Let's be fair. This just, I mean, for me, their first real album was Revolver. When they started writing their own stuff, oh man, that's a killer. And Beetle for Sale, killer albums.
Well, Revolver is very unusual. Every song a different style, and then the Indian influence, and then you get to the end and they're doing tape loops. They're right. So I mean, they kind of set out the playing field for adventurous rock.
Yeah. All that. Listen to this. So everybody was moving on. King Crimson, we were well into what was called orchestral rock before King Crimson brought out their Court of the Crimson King album. I think that was 68.
69.
69. So we were at it in 67.
How about the Moody Blues, though?
Well, they were a kind of pop band then.
But they had the orchestra on Days of Future Past.
And that was 1967
or 8.
That might have been 8. But I thought they were quite poppy.
Yeah. Well, they're considered sort of pre or proto prog, I guess,
early,
now.
Yeah.
Early
prog kind of thing.
And then, of course, the orchestral element of it, opens it up to being called symphonic prog or whatever you like.
The Nice were Emerson's band. I mean, they were very early in experimenting. They're great players, and some of the jazzers were also experimenting. John McLaughlin, well known for jazz, but he was kind of, it was good times.
Yeah, I mean, stuff with Stu Martin and John Stevens, and John had done a lot of different things before Mahavishnu. Let's put it that way. He experimented a lot. Yeah. Now, were you seeing these bands play? I mean, you say Yes came to see you. Did you guys go to see Yes? Were you kind of comrades in these groups?
No, we recognized them when they were in the back of the club. I don't think we actually went to see them. I can't remember for sure. I couldn't be, it's so long ago, I couldn't be sure, but we did spend a lot of time going out watching other bands, trying to take in as much as we possibly could. You know?
So in 70, 71, would you have heard or seen Gentle Giant?
Well, we knew them as from Simon Dupree.
Oh, so from the soul scene.
Oh yeah, the Eyes of Blue used to play in a ballroom every Thursday night, and that would be the night that the chart bands came down and played. I mean, everybody, the Hollies, you name it, they came down, and one of the bands that came and played were Simon Dupree and the Big Sound, and we actually got on very well with them. They were great guys, you know, and it was a very good band, soul band. And what happened was that we played in Portsmouth one time, and Ray, the bass player, came down to see us to say hello and watch the set, and he liked the band, and that was the last time I actually saw them until I was approached by Gentle Giant. And what had happened was we played in a college in London. I was playing with Graham Bond at the time, and we were playing on two different levels. There were two bands going on. They were playing downstairs, we were playing upstairs. And they came up to see us. Ray said hello. He had Gary with him and said, "Oh, how about coming down and seeing our band? We're playing downstairs." I said, "Yeah, great." Oh, he said, "We're called Gentle Giant now." And I went down and I caught a few tunes. I'm pretty sure Martin was playing with them then. It was just the end of Martin's tenure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Martin. Martin Smith.
But you also knew Malcolm, right?
No, I never met Malcolm before 2004 was the first time I ever met Malcolm.
I didn't know that.
Mm-mm.
So when you heard them as just started to become Gentle Giant, what did you think of the music?
I thought they were a blues band.
Yeah.
I didn't stay for long because we only had like a few minutes. Actually, they were playing Mr. Class and Quality, so it must have been Malcolm, because Malcolm played that on the Three Friends album. So it must have been Malcolm. Because it was a shuffle, I thought, oh, very good, nice little blues band. And I think I only watched that and maybe half of another one, but it wasn't any of the heavy stuff that they were getting into that I became more familiar with then when I actually joined the band.
It's so funny though, because you as a fan, Giant fans who know Mr. Class and Quality, think of it as a real kind of scherzo, kind of really adventurous tune, but it is a shuffle.
Oh, yeah.
There are all sorts of triplet subdivisions going on. Right. So there's all sorts of thing.
But that could be jazz blues, right?
But you really put me onto that. That's so funny because you could say, well, this is just this jazzy kind of bluesy.
Yeah. And I was playing with Graham Bond, which is jazz blues,
Well,
and
I have to ask you about Graham Bond because I mean he's such a seminal, important figure. Jack Bruce came through that band. So many different people came through that band. So what was that like?
it was absolutely brilliant. It was part of my musical education, that's for sure. Because his riffing, I mean, a guy who can play bass with pedals, right? Alto sax with the left hand, with the right hand, and scatting with his left hand on the organ, on Hammond. He was just superb player, absolutely brilliant. I did one album with him, with the new band that he kind of put together. The band didn't last very long because he got the call from Ginger to join the Air Force. So he and Diane, his wife, and the sax player that was in the band all kind of went en masse to Air Force. And I kind of got a job for a couple of months and then joined the Grease band. And I was with the Grease band for about 6 months, which taught me tempo because I kept getting shouted at about my tempo by Alan Spenner, who told me I was speeding up all the time. I probably was, I don't know, but they taught me all about tempo and grabs and, the kind of groove. They taught me groove. Now, Graham Bond was most of the way into groove. I mean, he never told me I sped up or told me off about my tempo, but the guys in the frighteningly wild guys in the Grease band did. But then I was a victim of another headhunt then because Henry McCulloch got poached by McCartney for Wings. So that folded. And the next thing was a telephone call from Raymond saying, "What are you doing?" I don't know how he tracked me down. I really don't.
Really?
Yep.
Because you were in a completely different part of the island at that point, right? I mean, you guys were in far from each other. I
was living in London at the time.
Ah.
Well, I had to be in London to be with Wild Turkey, Graham Bond, and the Grease band. So myself and my wife had moved up to London and got a flat there. But I don't know how Raymond tracked me down. I'll never know, because just the phone rang and he was there. And at that time, I had a job carrying carpets, putting carpets in trucks overnight, a night shift, just to make enough money to live. And my wife was cleaning houses. So we were living on tea and toast.
Oh, yeah.
So I was very glad to get a call.
So was the call from Ray was to start touring, right? They were touring Three Friends?
Yeah. Raymond told me the story. He said, "Well, are you doing anything at the moment?" And I said, "No, I'm carrying carpets, filling lorries overnight." And he said, "Well, our drummers had a motorcycle accident, broken a load of bones, and we're about to start a tour in 2 weeks. Do you think you could stand in for the tour? We saw you play with Graham Bond, and we like your playing, and we think you'd suit us. So can you play with the band until he gets better?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." What? He said, "It's £100 a week." I said, "Oh, that'll do me." So he said, "Well, can you come down to Portsmouth?" on the train and play along and do an audition with us. I said, yeah, sure. Went down. What did he said, what is this? Da, 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 da. I said, it's shuffle. He said, can you play along with it? And he did, and the phrasing came up. Da, 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 ba, da, da, easy. So I played that, and we played a couple more things, and Alucard we played, and they said, great. That was it. And I played it on Malcolm's kit, of course. And that was that. They said, yeah, good. Can you come back down and start rehearsal straight away?
You know, so it's interesting for me when you show up in Giant, because I liken it to groups like Genesis and Yes, who had other drummers, and then this drummer comes on the scene and he's the drummer for the rest of the time. So I think of Alan White coming in to play with Squire. I think of you coming on to play after other kinds of drummers were playing in Giant. And I think it's, you know, I had Malcolm on the program, so we had a long talk about this.
I watched.
Oh, you did?
Oh, yeah.
Was it okay?
Very impressed.
Okay, good.
I wanted to sign him up.
Well, this is the thing, you know, he came from a similar but kind of different background from you.
Yeah.
And I think when he heard Giant's music, maybe he didn't hear it as much of a rock thing in the way that you did. Because I feel like when you came to the band, you and Ray just like hooked up as one of the great rhythm teams in rock music. I won't even say progressive rock music. I mean, because, you know, it's like Sly's band with Greg Orico and Larry Graham, you know, when the drummer and the bass player are locked up and right, all of the other magic can happen on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
And you brought a gravity and a kind of power to Giant that I don't think was there before in the music. And I actually think, like with Yes and Genesis finally getting Phil Collins, that's when things really take off. You can't have it without the right drummer.
Mm-hmm.
And you were the right drummer. You are the right drummer, and you're playing on those recordings and live, because there's the live album too, which I always kind of like to play people that first to say, this is really what they were doing. You know, it's not an overdub project. This is how they played live. There's also great footage now that people can see on YouTube. But I feel like you brought a kind of heaviness to the music that was something that brought it to a different level of accessibility, enjoyability, all sorts of things. And the band became, I think, much more of a powerhouse live when you came on.
Well, it's all down to interpretation, isn't it? What you hear in particular tunes. And I obviously listened to Three Friends because that's what we were touring. And I really do admire Malcolm. I think he's a wonderful drummer.
He is.
But I just find that jazz thing a little busy, you know, and having come out of the Grease Band in particular, where it's all offbeat from up here, you know, the Bonham left. Look out, I'm going to hit you. You know, and I kind of try to simplify it a little. I don't like to phrase everything. I've been through all of that. You know, I've done all of that with the Eyes of Blue. Oh, there's a phrase, I must play it. You know, that kind of approach. So by the time I got to Giant, I said, hey, do you mind if I simplify this a little bit? You know, just keep playing through. you can play all the jangly stuff on top, and Ray is magic. He is magic. I would follow him to the ends of the earth. And I used to listen very, very hard to what he did and make sure that, he and I were tight, but I was laying back and just keeping that steady, anger, suppressed anger in tempo, and just playing tempo and playing important phrasing and lead-ins, and where something's going to change, and leading up to a next passage, or that kind of thing. And we tried it in rehearsal for the first tour, and they liked it straight away. They said, yeah, that sounds great. Just giving everybody else a bit of space,
And you're kind of back there really laying it down. Like you mentioned Bonham. I do often think that you're kind of making it into a Bonham situation, the way you play Giant,
when it was in the Eyes of Blue, we supported Zepp when they came back off their first American tour. And it was in a dance hall, but there was a balcony upstairs. So I was able to get up right above Bonham and watch him. And I have never seen anything so brilliant in all my life, on the rock side of it. He was just wonderful. He hit those things so hard. Incredible. And the triplets, stuff like quadruplets. I stole so much stuff off him. The next day, I was John Bonham. I was playing like John Bonham. Honestly, I was that taken with him.
Yeah.
He's a wonderful, wonderful rock drummer.
And clearly was aware of jazz, because you don't do that hand-foot coordination stuff with those triplets, unless you have some Max Roach in there somewhere,
Mm-hmm. Oh, I think he knew exactly what he's playing. He wasn't a guy who was just brought up on rock and roll.
No.
He was a great, great drummer.
Well, it's also an interesting period, because I tell this to my students that you don't have any concept that there really weren't rock drummers right away. They had to come from some other kind of music, because rock music comes in, and then all of a sudden the game changes, and guys had been playing blues and jazz are now playing, well, you mentioned the Mersey beat, but there's all sorts of other kinds of feels that are coming in post Ringo. And I think it's very interesting, because there aren't really progressive drummers yet. It's like you get guys like Ginger, you get guys like Bonham, you get guys like Michael Giles, but they had to come from someplace before they got to progressive, And I think of Zeppelin as a progressive band. Forgive me for saying that, but I mean, there's
a lot of stuff in there, a lot of very, very interesting stuff. But if we go back to the original rock and roll stuff, like Elvis and Jerry Lee, you're talking about country drummers are playing behind them, and jazz players, and the Crickets, he's a country drummer. So it kind of developed from that. When you get to Little Richard, then you start to get the guys who hitting the snare, and James Brown, two drummers, both giving it loads. Then this is the soul thing, and Al Jackson, Junior, beautiful, beautiful player, tempo, left hand, hardly any breaks, nothing, not even grabs. On Midnight Hour, he doesn't grab when the horns come in the beginning.
Right.
Intro, he doesn't grab that thing. That first grab that all the horns grab, everybody in the band's grabbing it. Not Al Jackson, he's just playing through it, man.
So John Weathers was always very aware of taste. and tasteful playing and supportive playing. And that makes you the perfect drummer for Giant, where there's 5 other guys that have something going on, and you sang, and you were playing percussion. So it's kind of a perfect meeting, isn't it? I mean, it was sort of meant to be that you would be with those guys.
It felt like that after the first tour. After the first tour, they turned around and they said, "This is it.
Yeah.
Would you like to stay?" I said, "Well, how's Malcolm going to take that?" And he said, "Well, he's still in bed with his leg in the air. We got lots of things to do. We got an album to record." And
were you doing any of the material from Octopus yet?
Not on the first tour, but after we finished the first tour I was on, which was supporting the Jimi Hendrix film live in Monterey, was it? We were supporting that, and that was all 3 friends and the earlier albums. We were doing Peel the Paint. We were doing Alucard. Quite a lot of stuff off the other albums. Mm-hmm. But as soon as that was finished, I mean, we started rehearsing Octopus, because everything was in the pipeline already, all the plans for recording. So that was it. They were a very, very busy band. So, I mean, that was part of the reason why they asked me to stay on, obviously, because there was a new album about to happen, and was I going to record that album, and then Malcolm was going to come back in. And in fairness, we got on so well on the tour, and I learned so much, and they all started really, because I was hitting them. Yeah. And I was trying to impress them. I wanted the gig.
That's quite a gig to get.
Yeah. And after The Eyes of Blue being a challenging band, lots of, the orchestral rock kind of thing, it was right up my street. Challenging music, different length bars, in a bar of 7, a bar of 5, and things to learn.
But that's another thing that I loved about the way you approached the music, was you weren't thinking odd meter as a listener. The phrases just flowed through. And that has so much to do with the drumming. It has so much to do with the drumming, not making it herky-jerky. When I was doing the Mahavishnu Project, we got to work with Jan Hammer. And I had a conversation with him about Dance of Maya, which is in 10 or 20, depending on how you want to look at it. And I was doing larger phrases instead of trying to hit every subdivision.
Uh-huh.
And he liked that, for the specific reason that he said, well, then it doesn't sound like a skipping record.
Great line.
Right. Now, it's funny because the skipping record idea was something Giant employed on some of Kerry's things, where you get to a phrase and then it sort of gets stuck there for a minute before it moves on. So yes. I like that quite a bit. But just the idea of also just larger groupings, more of a flow to the drumming, less of a herky-jerky thing, makes Giant, I think, go just to another level. Because if you're not in Giant as a listener for the compositions first, I mean, I am, but then there's the performances, but you don't have those performances without those compositions. And I think Ray and Kerry are 2 of the most underrated composers in rock music.
Absolutely. Kerry in particular. Why he hasn't written, he just shut down when Giant ended, but he didn't have Raymond chasing him. They work well together. separately, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
When they got together, Ray would be chasing Kerry, and Kerry would be chasing Ray and saying, "Oh, well, what about this?" And post Giant, Kerry just didn't have the support that he needed, which is why I don't think he's written any. I think he's written stuff, but he just won't play it for anybody.
And were you guys learning from their demos, from Kerry and Ray's demos to learn a tune?
Yeah, they would write and send us cassettes as soon as it was finished, or pretty well finished, or they wouldn't send a short cassette of a minute idea. It would be like an almost complete thing, maybe too much of it, which would have to be edited. But I'd get a cassette, and then I'd sit down and I'd count. I'd just sit there and count it, and back and forth, counting the bars. And by the time I'd got to the end and could count it all the way through, I'd learnt the tune. So, and for me, that's very important, because I did play the tune to the song itself, not a particular bar.
Right.
You listen to the tune, and that's what you play.
Well, you're listening to phrases and then and less of bars.
Eventually. I always counted the bars first.
Yeah.
To see what was what. So I knew what all the changes were. And you know what Giant stuff was like. There'd be a bar of 5 here, a bar of 3, 3 bars of 4, so I'd know it back to front by the time I'd done the math.
Right.
Got to the end and knew by heart the bar measures and stuff. And then maybe I just play 4/4 right throughout the whole thing.
What is your favorite tune, or what do you think is the most underrated tune on Octopus?
Ooh. Underrated. I've always loved River.
That's a great choice. I agree with you on that.
The snare sound on River is just out there. I don't know how he got it. It was a 5-inch Ludwig, 5.5, 5.5, 5. The old 404, was it?
Yeah, 5.5, I think.
5.5, yeah. I went on to get a 6.5 later on, but it was a real old one that I'd swapped with Terry Williams from Dire Straits, and it was in real bad shape. Oh, dear. And I'd been beating, the hell out of it for years. And I think I tuned it down a touch. And he got such a great sound on it, and it sounds like it's isolated almost. But I love that tune.
Yeah, River is great, and it has that great fill vocal in the middle.
Oh, it's gorgeous. A lot of good memories from Octopus. That was the first time I was in the studio with Giant and saw the way they recorded, the way they worked.
So tell me about that. How did they work?
Drums first.
Drums first. Not with bass?
Guide bass.
Guide bass.
And guide guitar, guide keyboards, but they'd want to get the drums in the can perfect. And then Raymond would go in and they would record the bass, because a lot of the time, the guide bass, it was DI anyway. So if it was perfect, they'd keep that. But it was layering. It was all layering. So I was on the spot with the bat.
Another reason for you to sort of really lay it down too, I think.
Yeah. And we always liked early takes, when all the aggression and the vitality and the you take chances and is this going to work maybe, or I don't know, you don't play safe.
Right.
You just go for it. So we used to, I'd try for second take probably. First take, run through. Second take, go for it. Third take, go for it. No fourth take. Forget it, go on to someone else.
And how long would it, sorry?
By the fourth take, you'd be starting to play safe.
Yes.
And you knew where a particular break worked. And so that break would kind of sound almost lazy because you knew it was coming.
Mm.
And it's up here and you weren't taking a chance.
So you did tour Octopus with Phil, right?
With Phil, yeah. Yeah, we toured Octopus. That was the first American tour. No, was it? We toured Octopus with Phil. I'm not sure whether we played much of Octopus on the Tull tour. I just can't remember.
On the Sabbath tour, maybe?
That was the same tour.
Ah.
We did like a month with Sabbath and we're about to come home and got the chance of going on the Tull tour, which our manager grabbed with both hands. Of course, I mean, the Sabbath tour was
difficult, would you say? Difficult?
Yeah, a little difficult. Trying to appeal to a Sabbath crowd is hard going. It's hard. We were much better suited to the Tull crowd.
But you know what's interesting, Mr. P, is that Ozzy is a big Giant fan. Did you know that?
I didn't know it at the time, but we got on very well with them. They were the same management, which is why we were touring with them. They were great guys, wonderful people, absolutely great.
Yeah.
And we used to get days off when we weren't expecting them in nice places because the band were, how can I put it, chemically indisposed.
Yeah, that might have happened a few times.
It did, yeah. And it always seemed to be in a nice place. Nashville, we had a few days off. LA, we did, but we were there for a few days anyway. But that was the Hollywood Bowl, and that, oh wow,
that's the firecracker incident.
That's the firecracker one when Phil lost it, I'm afraid, and told the audience what he thought of them, and they deserved it. I mean, it was only a small section of the crowd, but cherry bombs. That's not funny.
No. That stops being funny pretty fast.
Yeah.
But you were very well received by the Tull audience, were you not?
Oh yeah, I mean, the band had toured with Europe with Tull the year before. Malcolm played that one, and the band had gone down so well as an opener for Tull that, of course, Tull were very happy to have us opening.
Yeah.
because we behaved ourselves. We went on time. We came off on time. We didn't interfere with anything at all. I watched that. I think there were 28 shows and I missed one. I watched them every single night. That show was so good. What a wonderful, wonderful band. Professional, unbelievably professional, friendly. We always got a sound check.
Mhm.
We traveled on the same planes together every day between gigs. It was absolutely perfect. And we went down great, really, really good. And the audience were ready for them, really ready when they came on. We used to do 40 minutes, which was, quite a long stint. And go for it,
Yeah.
We knew it was partisan audience, so we were in heaven.
So what would you play for a Tull audience? What songs?
Oh God. You're talking a long time ago, but it was pretty much the same set as we did with Sabbath, which was a mixture, again, Alucard, Funny Ways, Peeler Paint, Mr. Class and Quality. I think we did an Advent of Panurge off the new album. But of course, we were promoting Three Friends at that time. So so we even tried School Days at one point, but we ditched that pretty quick. That was, a bit too fussy.
But such a beautiful piece, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Great, wonderful, absolutely lovely.
It was really interesting for me to hear School Days played by Three Friends with Malcolm and realize how much it really captured School Days.
Mm-hmm.
And then my son had the same affection for it, now having grown through his teen years and thinking of that as having captured his school days. Isn't that interesting?
Very.
Because there's something about it that's just totally imbued with that feeling. And it takes me back to my grammar school days. Well, for me, it would be like, third grade and what it was like. And then I think, Phil is also such an interesting figure because the concepts, the lyrics, he brings a level of culture to the music that I think puts Giant again in a different place.
Yeah, perfect word for it, culture, definitely. Because Octopus was his idea. Actually, if I remember rightly, he came up with the idea for Power and the Glory. I've got this idea about, and that was like a couple of years before it was recorded. We went back to that idea. But School Days, I mean, even the lick, isn't it? It's very kind of school.
Well, it's carefree.
Yeah. It is. It's carried brilliant.
He's so brilliant that I tell people, this guy went to the Royal Academy. He's so overqualified to be in a rock band that it makes Giant a kind of just one of one. It's just really a special case that only with guys like Emerson or maybe Dave Stewart do you have that kind of background to write that level of music and make it sound like it makes sense. And something I always enjoyed about Giant's music is that while you might say it's complex, there's usually only 2 or 3 subjects that are addressed in any given piece of music. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Kerry could write a hook. You know, he could do that as well. He could be as, you know, weird and unstructured as you like, and play right off the wall things. Dog's Life. I mean, that kind of stuff, you know, and the percussion stuff.
Percussion stuff, yeah, for sure.
Just
Dog's Life.
With a sheaf of papers, you know, and play the whole thing.
Is it all him on design?
Yes.
100%?
100%.
That's jumping ahead a little bit, but you know, I always found the classical percussion side of Giant as a percussionist drew me to the music. Groups like Gong that had marimba or vibraphone. So on the albums, was that mostly him doing the percussion stuff and you were doing the drumming, or did you get in on both?
It was very rare I played percussion. I didn't even play tambourine. Gary Green, far, far better than me on tambourine. He played all the tambourine. I did play marimba on It's a Dog's Life. Doing, 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 doing. But I learned percussion from the percussion that I play live. I learned all that parrot fashion from Kerry. He taught me all that. But design, what we did with that, he said, I need this, and this. So we got them all, put them in the studio. I said, right, off you go. And we wouldn't listen to the track that was just recorded. That's right. We'd play individual tracks back, and we didn't listen to the whole thing together until it was complete. So he'd go in, he'd play it, and it would be right because it would be spot on because he was reading the notes. We just play it back to him, and he said, yep, that's it. And we mute that track. Next. And then when it was all put together, designed, and he came in, I sat down, we played it all, and we all went, oh. It was incredible.
It's a standout piece. It's a great. I always thought it should be played by other people. I mean, I think, you know, the score should be made available, choir and percussion, boom, there you go.